Now, Donald Trump has finally signed his first trade deal with a trading partner, but it is not China that we all want to, and it's not India that we widely expected it to happen, but it is the United Kingdom. But for the UK, it is barely a good deal. There will still be a base 10% tariff on all goods coming from the UK. The only concession on the US side is that it will be removing tariff on cars and metals, and also reducing the import tax on cars from 25% to 10% for only the first 100,000 cars. And thirdly, they also removed the tariff on American beef and ethanol. So this is really quite different from the comprehensive deal that Donald Trump mentioned earlier on, but I guess the UK will just have to take it because the United States is one of the largest trading partner with the UK. So this is the effect of US bullying one of his partners once again. And while Trump is having all these negotiations with the United Kingdom, he implemented another form of tariff, and this time round is not even on physical goods, but on movies. So long the movies is not made in the United States, there will be a 100% tariff. But among all the bad news, I guess there's always a silver lining, and that is finally US and China is going to have its first trade talk. So Scott Bassett and also Jamieson Greer will be meeting their Chinese counterparts in Switzerland this week to discuss matters over 2 days. And Donald Trump has even said that the tariff on China will be coming down very soon.
With their Chinese counterparts, not preemptively, but if the talks go well, would you then consider lowering the tariff rate on China?
Well, it could be. I mean, we're going to see. Right now, you can't get any higher. It's at 145, so we know it's coming down.
But there was this very interesting debate between the two nations about who called each other first. It is really quite childish, but if you were to watch the video...
Yeah. China said the U.S. initiated the trade talks this weekend and that its position hasn't changed. Are you still confident you can reach a deal with China?
They said we initiated? Well, I think they ought to go back and study their files. Okay, I do think that.
美方近期不断地表示，希望同中方进行谈判。这次的会谈是应美方的请求举行的。
And if I were to place a bet, I would say in this case, it is very likely that the US called the Chinese first. And that's because China, while it is under negotiation with the US, is already preparing for the next bout of economic wars. So China just announced a sweeping measures to ease its policy, right, to shore up its economy. So they have reduced their reverse repurchase rates by 10 basis points. And they also reduced the requirement ratio for commercial banks by 0.5 percentage point and injecting another 1 trillion yuan of liquidity into the market. In addition, it will also lower the mortgage rate by 0.25 percentage point and also scrapping the whole RRR rates for automotive industries. And China is even going after companies that are already listed in the US. So over here, it says it will create conditions for its foreign listed firms to return to the domestic stock market while the US is having all this turmoil and uncertainty. And just when investors are flocking away from the US, the China set up an investment entity to stabilize the A-share market in China and also to attract more long-term funds into the stock market. Now, when China reduces its rate, there is a worry that the RMB will depreciate against the dollar. But in this case, China doesn't have to worry because there is an even larger outflow for the US dollar. So China could lower its rate without the fear of capital outflows. In addition to stabilizing and strengthening its domestic market, China is also focusing on overseas partners. So China and EU has recently come to an agreement to fully lift all restrictions on its exchanges and to boost bilateral ties. And immediately after the arrangement comes the criticism from the White House. So Peter Navarro, the trade advisor to Donald Trump, right, accused the UK of being a servant to the China and warned them not to be a dumping ground of cheap Chinese goods. But if we were to look at the trade arrangement between UK and China, you will see why it is not in the interest of UK to totally side with the US and not bother with China. In 2023, China is actually the 6th largest export for the UK markets for goods and services. And in 2024, China is the 2nd largest UK import markets, representing about 11% of the total import market. So from this statement from the UK government, you can see that China is an essential and in fact ever increasingly important partner of the United Kingdom. And therefore, thankfully, Scott Bassett says that the China negotiation is going to start without Peter Navarro. So all the best to the United States, and we hope that this could be the first step towards the final trade deal. Now, don't be mistaken, I don't think we will even get anything close to the two presidents coming together just over a weekend, but I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. And the US need this trade deal as soon as possible because the economic situation in the US is worsening. So the Port of Los Angeles director recently mentioned that there's going to be a huge drop of business after the Chinese tariff. And that is because they are expecting a 35% drop in the number of cargoes that is going through the port. And it's not just the import market. The US dollar as the reserve currency has been falling across the Asia. For example, the Taiwanese dollars actually rallied 9% over 2 trading days. And even for Hong Kong, where its currency is pegged to the US dollar, has been appreciating so much that the authorities has to come in to intervene. And since then, Hong Kong Central Bank has sold about $6 billion worth of Hong Kong dollars just to stay pegged to the US dollars. So overall, I think the US situation seems to be getting worse with the imports dropping, currency depreciating, and it is not cutting a very fair deal even to its allies such as the United Kingdom. However, with the first set of trade talks between the US and China happening, I think there's a little bit of hope that we can eventually see a resolution to this whole confusing situation, and this will be great for the stock market. Now, the stock market has since started to rally. Will this continue to sustain? We are not sure, but definitely this is some good news. So do you think this will continue, or it could just be a dead cat bounce where the market will subsequently retrace back? Type your comments below and I'll see you at the next one.